I'm going to bring in Rob Hill from the QCA Wrestle Podcast. I know it looks like Rob's got a couple issues with his webcam right now. Rob, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Jason, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
No, I can hear you loud and clear. I've got the podcast page up on the screen, so I know what the EOS webcam utility means. It doesn't like your camera for some reason. Always fun.
Okay.
Starting hour number 6. Tell you what, folks, if you're watching at home, well, you're watching. My wife just dropped me lunch. I must have inhaled it in about 2 minutes. So, very helpful there, Rob. It's not required, but I mean, if you just want to just keep rolling with the audio, we can do that. I've got the podcast up on the screen. If we can't get a webcam rolling. All right. You back there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you again. So again, don't really worry about the webcam if you can't get one rolling. We got you. We got the thing up on the screen. Looks like you dropped out of the chat, but we are good to go now. So if you're ready to commence, we can begin hour number 6.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let's go.
All right. Of course, one of our guests are already asking, do you have a face for radio? So, I mean, that may be a great introduction.
I definitely do, by the way. Yeah, you can see my podcast videos on YouTube, but you're probably better off listening to it anyway.
So our guest right now is Rob Hill. Him and his co-host Jay Zeimet host QCA Wrestle. And this one wasn't really on my radar. I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't really know a whole lot about the show before I put out the feeler to see who would want to be involved in International Podcast Days Wrestling Edition. So going to be a lot of this introductory questions as we begin. So Rob, let's talk about a little bit about your wrestling background and really what made you want to start a podcast about wrestling.
Yeah. So, Jason, first, I just want to thank you for having me on. I apologize for the camera, but we'll go ahead and talk anyway. So I have a kind of a unique, well, maybe not unique, but I started wrestling when I was in 4th grade and gave it a try. And about my 3rd practice in, I broke my ankle and it scared me and I stopped wrestling. And then around 8th grade, I was really into football. And you always hear how much wrestling helps football. So I tried it out again and sort of fell in love with the sport at that point, wrestled through high school. My high school team was pretty good. Davenport Assumption High School here in Iowa. At the time I was there, I wasn't a contributing member. I was JV when they were this good, but they were nationally ranked. They won Disney Duels one year. And one of the ways to describe the program at that time was it was kind of like the mafia. Once you get in, there's no getting out. So, yeah, I really got into it at that point. When I was done, I knew I wasn't a college wrestler, but when I was done with my career, my brother was getting into the sport, and he was a pretty good high school wrestler. He was a couple-time Iowa State place winner, and that kind of kept me into this, interested in the sport. Big Iowa Hawkeye fan, so we'd go to Iowa meets all the time. And about the time my brother was done, actually, I had my first son. And when he was when he was 4, I guess it was right before kindergarten, we gave him a try in wrestling, and his experience was kind of like my first one. He didn't break anything, but he didn't like it a whole lot. I was always one of my big things was always once you start something, you don't quit, at least in the middle of it, right? But after a lot of crying and begging of my wife, he talked me into letting him kind of quit at that point. So long story short, that was when he was 4. When he was in 3rd grade, he got back into it and he kind of fell back in love with it, kind of like I did. He's a junior in high school now and really into the sport and loves it to this day. So we've been so anyway, that's kind of a little bit of my wrestling story. One of my co-hosts and I worked together, and one of the big things we realized pretty quickly that we had wrestling in common. He's got a son in high school now as well, but we've talked about wrestling since our kids were probably in about 4th grade, and it's really all we ever talked about. We're like, you know what, we can talk about wrestling, and hopefully we can get a couple people to let us interview them, and that's kind of what started the podcast.
Yeah, and for those who are unfamiliar, QCA, you're talking Quad Cities Wrestling, and QCA, I'm guessing area? I'm not quite sure what the A would mean on the acronym there.
Yep, you're exactly right. So QC area is Quad Cities, and it's the actual Quad Cities is Eastern Iowa, Western Illinois. There's the Quad is 4, but there's actually like 5 major cities here that are sort of make up the QC area. But we expand a little bit further. Really, our coverage is about 40-ish miles from the Quad Cities, so we get a little bit out, but that's where our real coverage, that's where like the core of our site kind of started. Because we're wrestling nuts and because we like to talk to a lot of different people, our podcast, you can find a lot of different guests that aren't necessarily related to the Quad Cities as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to test my own geography here. Let's see. I'm not looking up any maps. I've got video to prove this. Well, I'm not. I swear to you, I don't have Google Maps up on my screen right now. Let's see if I can guess the Quad Cities based on what I know. Okay, Davenport, Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
Moline, Illinois.
Yep.
Rock Island, Illinois.
I believe so. Yes. Rock Island would be. Yep.
And let's see, what's the fourth? That's one on the Iowa side, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Is that Dubuque?
Nope.
No. What am I missing?
A little north, just a little north.
Okay, it's in Iowa. What could I be missing? And I'm trying not to look at the screen here because I can't decide. Let's see. What I give up on the Iowa, the second Iowa city.
Okay, it's Bettendorf. It's Bettendorf.
Iowa. I should know that. I should. I mean, I know people that wrestle. I mean, people know who we're Bettendorf. Okay, but again, okay. So I got 3 of the 4. So I got 3/4 of the Quad. I feel good. I know that there was the Quad City Bandits used to be a baseball team there, if I'm not mistaken. I think they were an Angels affiliate way back in the day. That would be my my reference there. But as we get to what's going on with the podcast, so looking at some of the first shows. So your first show launched this year, so we're only a couple months old with Jacob Rudiger. Now the name Rudiger is the same family, if I'm not mistaken, of Rudy fame, because Rob Sherrill once told me, yeah, there's a bunch of brothers all named Rudiger that all were high school wrestling coaches. So one, am I somewhat correct there? And 2, why was that the guest to kick off the show?
Yep, you are exactly right. Rudy Rudiger is Daniel Rudiger. That's the famous name. His family is full of wrestling coaches, and they're all, maybe not all in Illinois, but that's where they're really known is Illinois. So Jacob is a great guy. He's a Moline High School wrestling coach in Illinois, and he happened to be, he put it like he's our guinea pig. We know him pretty well, and we knew he had some good stories, so we were like, hey, we're gonna try this. Would you mind being our first guest? And he was happy to join and had a good time talking with him about it. They actually, Jason, they have a really cool thing called the Rudiger Cup, where there's so many wrestling coaches in the family. For years, they would go to the same tournament in Illinois, and whoever won the tournament got this hilarious looking trophy.
Yeah, I remember coming across that story, and Rob knows his Illinois wrestling like crazy. And I'm sitting there in Fargo back when they had the paper brackets, and I'm flipping through, vertical pairing, and I see Daniel Rudiger at the top of a list about a page at like Cadet 112, and I'm at the time doing features for USA Wrestling, and I'm like, hey, Rob, any relation? He goes, yeah, it's his nephew. And then he tells me the story about how, kind of like the Rudiger Cup, he said they also used to wrestle in a quad against each other. And it was what Joliet, Moline, and all those schools kind of there where they were all coaching. And I thought it was interesting. And so I interview Daniel Rudiger, who then again went to wrestle at Northern Illinois for a bit. And he ends up being an All-American that year. And it was like, yeah, and his nickname was Rudy. And it was just, of course, I'm guessing Rudy. Everybody gets called Rudiger. But it was definitely an interesting story. And as I went back and was researching the podcast here, I'm like, wow, Rudiger, there's a tie right away. But looking at the guests, I mean, you got some legendary Iowa names here. I mean, people know the Trezino family throughout the Quad Cities, Illinois, and the wrestling in Iowa. And then Chuck Yeagle, of course, NCAA champ, longtime wrestling official. Paul Bradley. This is a guy I got to know when taping a movie down with Gable and Randy Lewis. He now doing some, obviously doing the MMA, and then doing some coaching down at Queens as he's working on his master's. So I'm just impressed that you guys are 32, 33 episodes in, and the cross section is tremendous. So, what's it like learning how to podcast with such a diverse group of guests?
Well, it's been a lot of fun, first of all. But so Jay, who couldn't make it today, Jay worked last night, unfortunately, and he thought he'd be able to get up by now and talk with us, but he that didn't happen. But anyway, Jay is our networking guy. He seems to know just about everybody around here. So he really sets up a lot of our interviews. It's a lot of fun, a lot of diversity there, like you mentioned. One of the really fun ones, somewhat early on, we did a referee, Chris Meineke, has been a referee in the Eastern Iowa area for 24 years now. We wanted to, and I know some other guys have done this. Blood Round obviously has a lot of good referee stories. We wanted to get, a perspective from the other guy on the mat, So there's a picture of Chris right there. Yep. He's been around this area a long time and had some really good stories to share from the referee's perspective.
Interestingly enough, on our screen there's all 5 pro wrestling podcasts. I actually listened to 2 of them. But that just one thing about the podcasting thing, when you jump into it, is the technology behind it. Right now, you said you do some video, but what was the thing that you discovered quickly that, okay, we're gonna have to evolve a little bit. There's a learning curve here with starting a podcast.
Yeah, really quickly. So I do all of mine. We do it taped. I haven't done any live, so that's part of my. Actually, I want to start doing it. It's kind of fun, but I haven't done any live interviews yet. So one of my biggest things was editing software.
Okay.
Just doing some research. I know there's a lot of free ones, but one of the, actually, I guess it was a really good opportunistic COVID situation. Apple's, their Final Cut Pro, they were doing a 90-day free trial. And I was like, you know what? I might as well try it. If in 90 days we're not doing this anymore, no, I didn't lose anything. If we are, then I'll go ahead and buy it. And we still are. We love it. So we went ahead and got that. But learning that software definitely took me it was a little bit of a challenge for me. A lot of YouTube videos, a lot of learning on the fly from watching other people do it on YouTube. But
so you guys you record a video and then you distribute it, and then the audio is what's put out on iTunes and such. That's how I'm understanding it?
Yeah. Yep. So what we've done so far, almost all of ours have been done through Zoom. And which is, again, we learned about Zoom through COVID. And obviously that's where a lot of people started using Zoom. But so we just record the video through Zoom. I put it into Final Cut, do whatever editing I need to do. And then you can export it as an audio file and then in a video and audio file. So I upload the videos to YouTube and Facebook. And then I do the audio file to Anchor is what we're using currently.
Yeah, it's one thing is when I jumped in on Final Cut Pro, I was talking with Kyle Klingman on one of our earlier segments, is that's what we used to edit Wrestling 411 with, and coming in blind on that software, ooh boy, yeah. I mean, granted, it's a lot different looking than it was 12 years ago when I was playing with it, but I remember using it at USA Wrestling, and yeah, very versatile. It's like one of the industry standards in terms of editing, but and then exporting the audio. So, I mean, one thing that we were told in podcasting is if you do audio, figure 1 minute of 4 minutes of editing per every 1 minute of showtime. They say with video, that's usually 8-1. So how much has your editing time gotten better? I remember my first show, Wrestling 411, it took me probably 16 hours to edit a 1 hour show. And then I got down to, 3-4 hours and whatnot, but definitely a learning curve. So how much is that post-production totally, kind of weaned itself down, I guess?
Yeah. So I would say, I'm still pretty low tech. Like obviously you can tell my camera's not even working right now, but I've got AirPods in and then I use just the camera built into my MacBook. And then editing wise, so Final Cut Pro, and then in terms of like an intro and outro, all I've used so far is GarageBand, and I'm sure there's a whole lot better programs out there, but once I sort of standardized my intros and outros, then I could finish those up in about 15 minutes each episode. And then for like an hour-long podcast, I'll bet it takes me maybe 2 hours of editing at this point. It definitely was a lot more than that. I'll bet it was more like 4 or 5 for sure at the beginning. But yeah, it's like anything, you keep practicing, you keep getting better. And I still, because I recorded, I'm able to tell my guests, hey, I'm probably going to screw up, but the good news is I've gotten decent at editing, and so I can fix it. So that's always a crutch that I still have, for our episodes.
Yeah, definitely a work in progress on how you learn that software. And now from the audio side of it, I'm not going to make recommendations in terms of, there's no paid advertisement. I've mentioned Book Like a Boss for scheduling. We've talked about Anchor for hosting and whatnot. One thing I found is if a lot of people through work, again, discovering it through COVID, was with the Adobe suite. So if people were using desktop publishing, had InDesign, had Photoshop, had Audition, had all this other stuff. And that's how I ended up using Adobe Audition. Audacity's out there. That's a free one. Hindenburg Journalist is a good one that's inexpensive. Reaper has been making a run. So if you're out there, kind of new and trying to move from one software to the next, those are some of the ones that get recommended. Those are also some of the ones that are out there that you'll get a lot of tutorials on. When we get away from the tech and we look at, the wrestling side of it and the synergy with a co-host, sometimes that's, Kevin and Tommy with Blood Round. I just talked to Tommy on before this, is that relationship and whatnot. And how do you go from just being friends talking wrestling to somebody to friends talking wrestling somebody and recording it for everybody to see?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Jay and I, we've known each other for a really long time, but it definitely is a little bit of an interesting dynamic to record that, our interactions and having it available for everybody. I would say it's been pretty smooth. There's definitely times where we'll find ourselves talking over one another, and then there's been more than once where we'll start talking, and then literally both of us will say, "Oops, sorry." I'll say, "Sorry, Jay." He'll say, "Sorry, Rob," and then so there's those times, but overall, not too bad. Not too bad. We both know we have our kind of our roles. I've got more, even though I'm not great, obviously, at it. I do most of the tech jobs. Like I said, he's our networking guy. So he's the one. Doug Schwab was an interview we wanted to get on for a long time. Doug probably got tired of Jay sending him messages, but we finally ended up getting him. And if it wasn't for Jay, there's no way I would have ever gotten to talk to Doug Schwab on our podcast. So he does a lot of good work, for us.
Yeah, episode 30, you got an Olympian out there, so that's also one you got to. I'm going through some of these names too. What's cool is the names that I remember. I mean, I remember Lambros photos. It's like outside of that area. I'm wondering how many people remember that name, and that's the one that I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet. But his career didn't pan out as much as people thought it would at Illinois. I think injuries played a role there, but I remember him from Fargo being just a hammer. So, what's it like to get those guys in and maybe touch on some of their careers that may be kind of a, I guess, sticky subjects to some people?
Yeah. So one of the really cool things Lambros shared. So I wasn't all that successful. I was a pretty average wrestler, but being able to hear a lot of these guys who had super good careers, especially like Lambros, like you said, he had a couple injuries once he got to Illinois, but he had an amazing high school career. I believe he's actually his high school where he's coaching at now is United Township. I believe he's the only 4-time state place winner ever out of that high school. And to do that in a large school in Illinois is tough. So one of the stories I really enjoyed from him had to do with his middle school wrestling and how he would go to practice and then he would have to run. I think he said 4 or 6 miles or something crazy like that. He'd go from his middle school practice and he'd run all the way over to the high school practice and then wrestle the high school practice as well. I know I didn't have the drive for that when I was in middle school. Stuff like that's pretty impressive to me for sure. Another really good story, actually, we just recently posted on Instagram and stuff too, but Brent Metcalf is one of my favorite Hawkeyes, and obviously now he's at Iowa State, but his story, he told us about winning the Pan American Games. Obviously, I knew, his big goal was Olympic Games. That's what everyone wants, right? But he said he won the Pan Ams, and it's customary that they get the flag, they take the picture with the flag, maybe they do a lap around the mat.
The victory lap, yeah.
Yep. He said for him, he wasn't happy, right? He's like, yeah, I won Pan Ams, that's great, but I'm not celebrating. This isn't the Olympic Games. So it was just interesting hearing him how even the Pan American Games, it was just another box he was checking on the way to his bigger goal. Like I said, I never really had that mentality myself, but hearing some of the great, super successful people in the sport, hearing those stories, and then my hope is, I know I make sure my sons listen to some of these, hoping some of these younger wrestlers can learn, some of the lessons from the past guys. That's pretty special.
So as this was born out of COVID, obviously your start date, kind of coincides a couple weeks after everything shut down. I was actually in Cedar Rapids at the Division IIIs when the word came down, and since then we've seen programs cut from wrestling. We've seen over 370 teams around all sports, and it sometimes makes you wonder where the future of sports is going and how you cover it. So what do you guys want to get out of the show, and what's it been like to try to do something to, more or less like, okay, let's keep ourselves busy because there's no wrestling for us to watch?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things we talked about when we first started was one of our goals is to get more attention just in our area specifically. So we did start it definitely during COVID. We started our Facebook page just a little before COVID kind of hit, and we were talking about kind of starting just sort of like a small media company, just trying to talk, get the word out there about some of our kids. We've got a couple of really good sites here in Iowa. IA Wrestle, I know you're definitely familiar with. Tony will be on here in a little bit. The Predicament is another one that they do pretty well. But rightfully so, their big focus is on the upper echelon guys, right? Like the definitely the top kids in the state, the kids who are nationally ranked, they're getting a lot of airtime. But there's a lot of other, we've just figured there's a lot of other people who we can just help highlight is all. So another part of that, Jason, I'm sure this is similar everywhere, but in our area, there's somewhere, this is just a kind of a guess, but I'd say there's close to 30 schools with wrestling programs. About 4 or 5 of them seem to be sort of just head and shoulders above everyone else every year, right? They're the tough, tradition programs. So one of the things we've been really focusing on, and we're going to continue, is just help highlight every program. Some of the guys that we've had so far, they've told me, "Hey, I'm surprised you want to interview me." My thing is, we really want to talk to everybody. We're hoping one of our goals is just to help every program get more wrestlers, get more people excited about wrestling, and hopefully their teams can be more competitive. But at the very least, more kids in the sport, more kids learning the lessons that that wrestling can provide.
The one thing I love about shows like yours is in the Inside Trip and Blood Round is it's two people that love talking about wrestling to one another. And was there any hesitation about when you get the idea to start it and be like, you're putting yourself out there? There's got to be a little bit of confidence, a little bit of ego to say, all right, I'm going to put myself out there. And it's one of those things where you want to avoid imposter syndrome. Who the heck cares what I think? How do you put that away and be comfortable enough to start from scratch in the middle of a pandemic? Like, we're going to talk about wrestling and we're going to do it and we're going to put ourselves out there. Was there hesitation there? Yeah,
there was some for sure. So last year I spent a lot of time just writing articles and stuff like that for Tony Hager. And when I started sending Tony stuff, he was telling me, "Hey, people are liking this." And honestly, I thought he was kind of just messing with me. I was like, people really care about what I have to say. A little bit anyway. At least, he wouldn't tell me if that wasn't true, I didn't think. But what I was doing, what kind of started my whole idea of starting a site was every tournament I went to, I would research all the top kids that were there, what they're ranked, who they've beaten. I'd put together like relatively elaborate spreadsheets and I'd send them to our coaches. Like Coach Dan Knight is my, my son wrestles at Bettendorf. I'd send it to Knight. I'd send it to a couple of my other buddies who are kind of wrestling nerds, kind of like myself. And, anyway, so I sent one to Hager just to see, like, hey, is this something you might like? And he was excited about it. I'm like, man, if he thinks it's cool, maybe I do have something that people might be, potentially interested in hearing. So, but there was definitely hesitation at first. Yeah. And then the other part, Jay Zeimet, my co-host, has made me laugh a couple of times. He's like, have you noticed people looking at you different? Have you noticed like people maybe recognizing you a little more? I'm like, no, but I honestly don't really pay attention, that much to others out in public. He's like, man, I'm getting a lot of funny Facebook friends that I've never, not funny, but like new Facebook friends, people that I didn't know, So Jay's definitely mentioned that it's kind of a different dynamic, having our faces out there.
Yeah, it's one thing too, the Facebook friend thing, and I get that a lot. And again, I'm to the point now where it's like Jake Herbert taught me that when you need to like purge your friends list, it always starts to do it. You do it on the birthdays because those are the people that show up. So you're basically unfriending people on their birthday, and it's not personal. But I'm also the point where right now on my Facebook, it's kids and wrestling podcast links. I'm really kind of boring, and I probably like I said, I don't want people to be offended if I don't accept it because there's a ton of people that I don't really know that I just need, oh, you know what? I'm getting kind of off of Facebook personally. It's just, okay, there's a link to Instagram of my kids. So they're looking at me differently now. It's because I unfriended you, and I don't mean that personally. But in the last bit we got left as we talk about QCA Wrestle, what's next for you guys? How long do you see this thing going? And I guess as a passion project, like podcasting is for so many people because it's not a business venture, what do you really want to get out of it?
Well, I think I could see this going for quite a while. I know for me, it's one of the only things I ever really think about is wrestling. You know, like anytime during this COVID time, it was especially hard because there was none, right? Like just watching old wrestling matches on YouTube. Found some awesome. Actually, Josh Jeva we had on the podcast. He was a former Iowa wrestler. He mentioned the Guru Archives is an awesome Instagram account to follow for old time, wrestling stuff. So I spent so much time doing all of that anyway. I don't think I'm ever going to get tired of talking about wrestling. And Jay, his son, he's mentioned his son's a senior. So right now he's in the college decision-making mode, trying to figure out where he's going to go. He's like, once he's off to college, he's going to have all sorts of time. So we're definitely going to be working to get some streams, just doing some live events, stuff like that is sort of what we're hoping to do. Iowa Wrestle just did an awesome night of conflict. I know you were there, and
it was a blast.
Unfortunately, I couldn't make it, but I watched it, of course, and we're hoping to do something like that, Quad City based, here for our local kids someday as well, and just hopefully keep growing the excitement around our sport here, at least here locally.
All right, Rob, appreciate it, and the insight in what makes QCA Wrestle tick. You got the screen up there if you want to check it out, if you're an Iowa fan or if you're an Illinois fan or if you're just a fan of wrestling and hearing some new voices. QCA Wrestle Podcast right there on the screen. So, Rob, appreciate the time, and next time we chat, we'll see you face-to-face.
Absolutely. I'll get that camera fixed. I'm sorry again, Jason, about that, but thank you very much for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.